In this study, it is thought to exist as a cyborg in the city with the tools that the digital Flaneurie can use. The word cyborg is handled as reflecting the unity of thoughts formed in the mind, namely human and machine, real and virtual, under the leadership of technological devices. In this digital Flaneurie experience, it is aimed to be with people by moving with our fingertips wherever and whenever we want without any need for the body. Thus in this study, to look for the invisible face of the reality we see in real Flaneuries, it will be reflected how the space is used in different ways and how it gains meaning by serving to which users. For this purpose, materials such as social media, shared texts, images, videos, websites, and digital maps were used. With these digital materials, the cyborg's story will begin with the opening of the human body to the world. I chose this city for my digital Flaneurie experience, because I observe that while it reflects its past with its perceived space, it also hosts the skyscrapers produced by the capitalist process that reflects a designed space. As a cyborg, I want to feel the place and touch the lives there with the sense of vision and hearing that digital devices provide me. I have determined 2 focal points to observe the effects of perceived and designed spaces that Lefebvre defines on the city because I want to witness this change with my thoughts. And my main road starts from Red Square, perceived space, and extends to Old and New Arbet, designed space, areas. I start my digital experience with Red Square, which I think is the heart of Moscow, with what my digital devices show. The square often seems to be a meeting place that offers different activities for users at different times. As a cyborg, I want to observe that crowd, beyond the body, with the help of social networks, to see how it uses the space and what it means for them. Also, the architectural works that I think are unique and help define the square attract my attention. So I can perceive Russian architecture and where I am by looking at these masterpieces. When I walk around the internet with my digital devices, the main reason I want to work in this square was the St. Basil's Cathedral. When I first saw it, I felt like I was in a fairy tale. It appears quite exuberant, majestic, and interesting like a fairy tale castle. It looks really different from the examples I see and know. In most of the shared photos I have seen about the square, I think that seeing the cathedral is actually evidence that it has a similar effect on people. However, I can't feel that when I walk around among people as cyborg, people have an awareness other than the difference of its facade, the cathedral. I see that almost everyone wants to be photographed in front of it, and unfortunately it adorns only the background of many people's photos. I'm not sure they want to perceive its different architecture and story that reflects its history. I want to look inside with my cyborg eye, which will isolate me in the crowd. Fortunately, I can see a few curious people who want to see inside the cathedral. As I pass through narrow wooden stairs and colorful figured corridors, I feel like on the pages of history. Also, its interior looks just as impressive as its facade. I think the square thus gained meaning with different users at different times and contributed to the formation of urban memory for urban people. As cyborg, I can blend into the crowd with the advantage of my digital tools. So, I can encounter many users in the same place at the same time and I can observe them. While it is quite difficult for me to realize this situation in real Flaneuries, I can now fit many areas and users in a single square with my cyborg eye. According to my observations, it is intertwined with the city, but also I see that the square is isolated from the vehicles so that people increase their activities in the square and feel better with their bodies. But I cannot see the Lefebvre's idea pulse of beats everyday life in the squares, except for certain days celebrated. At a casual time, these squares seem to be a not meeting place for the urban, but mostly an area where tourists come to explore. Another thing that caught my attention in the square is that there is no area where users can sit. So I think people are turning to cafes, restaurants, and mall-like places. I see again on my digital map that the square is being evaluated with commercial concerns. Although some shopping mall is very expensive, I see the stalls selling local products in the square. I think the square serves all users and wants to accommodate many differences. A rather monumental structure that I think might be a museum in the square welcomes me. However, I was very surprised when I learned the use of the building. I realized once again how much the capitalist process is in our lives. Because this magnificent building is a shopping center. The fact that such a form fulfills this function made me think. While the capitalist influence is reacting in the square, its adoption in the mall attracts my attention. Whereas don't they both serve the same purpose? Why don't we react to expensive places in the mall? Could it be because we love to consume? I observe the contradiction created by capitalism on the place. This situation shows the concept of Lefebvre's surrounding of capitalism everywhere. Can we say that the capitalist process transforms the square? I think we can say. When I observe people with my digital devices at many different times, I see that there are communities for consumption in many places, expensive brands, including small businesses in the square, direct people to consume. These commercial forms increase commodification. Today, I can see with my cyborg eye that even leisure activities are commodified, as in the gum shopping center. People spend their time using the place. But unlike Lefebvre's concept, the pulse of the city is no longer on the streets and squares. I think it beats a pulse in commercial areas, mostly shopping centers. In digital environment, I always observe crowded places as areas under the influence of the capitalist process. That's why I turn my cyborg eye into these areas. After the square, my digital map takes me on a journey from Red Square to Arbut Street. According to the images my technological devices show me, another place that I think is the pulse of the city is the Arbut region. When I look at the pictures, I see that they host two different places and users. I even think that their only similarity is their name. Considering the differences in space, I continue my digital path. This experience, which will be much more difficult in reality, becomes much faster and more fun with my cyborg eye. My digital tools offer me the opportunity to watch every building faster and from different angles on this journey. As I progress, I see many buildings of different scales that reflect their history. Although the street seems to serve vehicles in general, fortunately a sidewalk is also considered for pedestrians. However, as I move towards Old Arbut, I notice texture changing. I'm moving towards a very crowded place that I think is the focus point. Some points on my way catch my attention. Traffic has started to intensify and vehicles seem to take control. This path seems like a place designed for vehicles, not people. I feel like on the ring road. So, people turn to underpasses. I observe that public spaces change their original functions and turn into movement functions over time. I can see that pedestrians are in second place and vehicles are in top priority. As I proceeded to Old Arbut Street, I started to hear the sounds of music. I can't wait to explore the street. I feel myself among these people, but I am in a position where they don't see me. So, I am watching them comfortably. I don't have to be physically there to feel that I am there. Because as a cyborg, it is enough to have just soul to exist. I come to the entrance of the street called Old Arbut, and although there are different users and different times, I also observe similar activities here. I find myself in an artistic street where there is no vehicle and people can move freely. People's movements seem comfortable and they look different from the hasty people in the capitalist system. I do not observe the Lefebvre's idea that leisure activities are commodifying here. I see that leisure activities can be spent without commodification. These places seem far from the contradiction created by capitalism in my cyborg eyes. I think this street is human-oriented and is waiting to be explored with its various artistic activities. Here I feel peaceful and away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I feel like there is no concept of time here, people here seem to enjoy life. As I walking in this street, which does not go far from the human scale, and allows them to spend time together, I observe that the ground floors of almost every building turn into commercial centers. Considering the consumption craze of today, frankly, this does not surprise me. Despite that, I observe by means of my digital tools that the street has its own texture and people-oriented activities are more prominent. Every time I taking a step with my cyborg eye, involving me in a different event makes me think of them. Although this street contains trade centers, the street is in my mind with artistic activities. In social media, I observe that Old Arbit Street is quite remarkable at different times and by different users. I see graffiti on the wall surface, which is quite familiar. I think this wall adorns the background of many users. When I research for the street, seeing this wall instead of the activities proves this. After watching them, this raises some questions in my mind. Why is that? We use buildings, walls, or any architectural elements just for taking pictures. Are we trying to see the invisible face? Or are we only make do with what technology shows us? I keep mixing with my cyborg eye, among the crowd. I get involved in every place but they are not aware. I can reach these activities much faster than usual with my fingertips. I can experience many aspects of events with more users. In this street, I often observe crowded places as areas where artistic activities take place. According to Lefebvre, in the process of transition to urban society, makes cities a consumption place. But I observe that people on the Old Arbit Street are far from the effects of the capitalist city. I think that capitalism does not affect human life in the same way everywhere and the place is not consumed in some areas, and the place is produced with new experiences with new users. Contrary to Lefebvre's idea of the use of the generalization of commodities due to capitalism and therefore the tendency to destroy the city and urban reality, I think that this area remains intact despite the capitalist order and continues to reflect the texture of this street. My digital devices show me that the street is also used by people in the evening. However, as I move towards Arbit Square, I feel the texture of the street changed. I observe that artistic events have been replaced by commercial places. Perhaps these places have become more visible due to the decrease in human activities. I think the feature that makes the street meaningful was the artistic events of people and the realities they produce together. Probably these activities, in the words of Lefebvre, it constituted the perceived space. With my cyborg eye, I see familiar places as I get along the street, like Turkish restaurants, and of course, Starbucks, which are among the indispensables of our capitalist system. The crowd of artistic events, now I see it being created by the capitalist system. Is the place starting to change? Does the designed space transform the perceived space? Or were they the users and events that provided us to perceive the space? With the data provided by the digital devices, I am going to my final focus by with the crowd. I am thinking these questions. Does it really reflect the place name, New Arbit? If so, how does it reflect? After this artistic street that I discovered with my cyborg eye, my digital map leads me to the New Arbit region. As I move from the Old Arbit region to the New Arbit region, I notice that the texture has changed, the vehicles have dominated the road, and I have observed that people are moving faster. According to my digital devices, I think I'm going somewhere organized with capitalist concerns. The buildings started to rise and seem to have oppressive domination everywhere. The buildings look the same type, repeating each other constantly. After the square where the human scale is preserved in Old Arbit Street, this street makes me feel like I am in a different place. Even if they are connected with a square, Old and New Arbit Streets serve different lives and users. I can observe this situation in this square. According to Lefebvre, abstract space is a multi-unit, contradictory, and plural, forced combination of opposites. Images in urban space with information and power symbols are constantly changing. I think that its new title is reflected to us through space as part of the capitalist order. I observe that these images settle in the memory of the city over time and define this place. I feel the presence of vehicles rather than people in the space. While the roads are quite wide for vehicles, people seem to be trapped in a sidewalk where crossing is unlikely. I observe similar situations while traveling with my cyborg eye. Even if the events are different, the problem is the same. I don't think space serves people. So who and what does the space serve? With the advantage of my cyborg eye, I would like to look at this street once again at night. When I walk around the new Arbit region, I see that life here is very different from the square and the old Arbit region. I see that this designed space is alienated from its culture. I feel like anywhere under the influence of the capitalist process. It is not like different and interesting buildings in Red Square. These buildings are not interesting to me, but ordinary. I cannot understand where I am by looking at the skyscrapers. Today, in many cities where capitalism is so intense, I observe that the perceived place has become a designed place. Because, according to my digital observations, I see that the new Arbit region has left the old Arbit behind and changed the definition of the place perceived by some people. I witness once again the capitalist system transforming time and place. Unfortunately, nowadays, in cities built according to the tastes of the consumer society, I observe the construction of the city apart from the identity of the city. With my digital observations, I cannot see the Lefebvre's concept that the place is a social product and that every society will produce a different place in this city. I think this situation has changed in the capitalist order and every society has started to produce similar products. The new architecture, which has moved away from the rising human scale and made with commercial concerns, alienates people to daily life, and leads us to a fast and meaningless life and actually causes us to consume space. After watching the city with my cyborg eye, I think these questions: why do we build soulless monotonous high-rise buildings instead of buildings with such a beautiful history? I find it causing the capitalist system to disappear in time and place. Lefebvre's idea that it is impossible to return to the traditional city, however, for the future, a different residential area larger than the old texture of the earth should not be created. Of course, the architecture of historic buildings in the square cannot be applied to new residential areas, but why are we build buildings that are so ordinary that we forget where we are? Wouldn't buildings that reflect human scale and history be more suitable? In today's urban life, I see that capitalist cities have become a consumption place, especially in the new Arbit region. Because of capitalism, I observe that, as in the Arbit region, there is a tendency to destroy the value of commodities, and hence the city and urban reality. Although new Arbit is in my mind in this way, let's not forget that it is in our hands not to succumb to the capitalist process as an architect. As Lefebvre said, the capitalist mode of production takes over the city, rearranges it and reproduces it by harmonizing it with the nature of the system. Nowadays, this process transforms and will continue to transform cities. However, there are some areas that have created urban memory. There, the influence of capitalist processes is to some extent effective. Can't we find an answer by asking ourselves this question? When we think of these areas, firstly, will we think of activities, unique architectural works in there, or will we think of commercial concerns? In your mind, which one is there? What I see and feel with my cyborg eyes is that, just as in the square, although capitalist influences have been seen from past to present, this venue will remain a meeting place in events. It will continue its existence as a perceived space that continues to accommodate many functions and differences in people's minds.